Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for our national anthem. Mesdames et messieurs, levez-vous s'il vous plaît pour notre hymne national. Please welcome the Cultural Link Nye Children's Choir for a special performance of our national anthem.
Our homeland things to plan.
Please welcome to the podium our MC for the evening, Rosemary Barton, co-host of The National on CBC and former host of Power and Politics.
Hello. I'm the person that has to get you all to sit down. Let's see how that goes. Hello. Hello. I'm good. How are you? People in the back of the room, people on the side of the room, please find your table. If you know me, you know that I'm not extremely patient. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir, s'il vous plaît. It's like you can't even hear me, or you're ignoring me. It's really the left side of the room that's having a problem. Everybody sit down, please. Yeah, you too, troublemaker. Okay, that's good. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes. Then I'm dropping the hammer. Hi, Ambassador. How are you? Good to see you. All right. I'm going to get the ambassador to sit down. Then we'll be good. Someone can tell Jerry Butts where his table is? No? No seat for him? Okay, everyone, let's go. Don't make me go all Chris Alexander on you. It's not going to work out for any of us. I hope he's not here. Probably not. Okay, I'm starting. Here we go. I'd like to welcome you all to the Public Policy Forum's 31st Annual Testimonial Dinner and Awards. Je voudrais vous souhaiter la bienvenue au 31e banquet d'honneur annuel du Forum des politiques publiques. Let's start by taking a moment to recognize and thank the Mississauga of the New Credit and their ancestors for taking care of the land and water so we can celebrate here tonight. We recognize that we are gathered tonight on unceded traditional territory. Yeah. Thank you to that lovely and very cute group of children for singing the national anthem for us. And thank you to the Public Policy Forum for asking me to host events here tonight. As a national news anchor, you can imagine how hard it is to get 3 days off. This event does have a reputation of being a little bit long. The longest dinner in Canada, some people have told me. The good news is that we are going to end on time tonight because I've been given a quarter of the amount of time that Peter Mansbridge would have been given. He would like that joke. My primary goal is to get you out of here by 9:30, and if I see that things are going off the rails, I'm going to lock the doors and have you solve the pipeline debacle. Although most of you probably want to solve that because you're all nerds, so that's not going to work out. By next year's public policy forum, marijuana will be legal in this country. So we're all just going to sit in this room and chill for 4 hours. So nothing will really change at all, in fact. There are people that worry about the CBC being too close to the Liberal government. Of course, that is not true. We maintain our independence regardless of who is government, our journalistic independence. The fact that I'm going to change my outfit 6 times tonight is just a coincidence. Oh, come on, that was good. There is an election in the offing in this province. This you have to be a CBC fan to get this joke. Kathleen Wynne, Doug Ford, Andrea Horwath, whoever that Green Party leader is. I have an idea. Why don't we just let them all take a turn being premier? Just like randomly, depending on their day and schedule, they can just rotate hosting that. No, being premier, I mean. I focus grouped it. It's not a crazy idea. You know, life is a lot like an at-issue panel. You're all going to miss that issue tonight. Hopefully you PBR it. The at-issue, it's a smart Quebec woman. She's here tonight, dropping wisdom all over the place, and then Andrew Coyne telling you why you're wrong. He's not here, so I can make that joke. Let's get on with the business at hand. CPAC is with us this evening, so all those jokes hopefully won't get me fired. Live streaming tonight's dinner. The video will be available on their website in the days ahead if you want to rewatch things. If you want to connect with other people who are here, you can download the Wahova app. It's on the screen somewhere. For tweeters, of which I am an avid user, please use hashtag #PPFawards or mention @PPForumCA. For those of you who have been here many times, you know that you generally don't eat dinner because you're working the room and you get drunk without realizing it, so be careful. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our head table guests. Please hold your applause until the end, even if you're a fan of one person in particular. Anne-Marie Hubert, Francine Pelletier. You can stand. Yes, stand. Yes, stand. You're important, both of you. Karen Levine, Jerry Adelman, Beverly McLaughlin, Janice Neal, Michael Donovan, Minister Catherine McKenna, there she is, I didn't even see you, Mary Walsh, Minister Ahmed Hussein, no, the chair is there, Nori Campbell, Edward Greenspan, you should do at least one of those, Minister Bill Morneau, busy guy, Richard Discerny, Nancy McCain, Mark Carney flew back for us. How lovely. Carol Swan, Minister Navdeep Bains, I don't see him either, empty seat, they're very busy. Neil Turok, the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Elizabeth Dowdswell. Caitlin Tolley, who has the best dress in the room. Kennedy Bear Robe. Senator Peter Harder. And Julie Caffley. All right, those are the important people you should make sure to take time for today. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for the evening. Nori Campbell joined TD Bank some 18 years ago. She currently leads the teams responsible for human resources, marketing, corporate and public affairs, financial crimes, fraud management, and enterprise projects. That seems like a lot for one person to me. Nori has been awarded Canada's Top 40 Under 40, was recognized as one of Canada's most powerful women by the Women's Executive Network, was honored by the Directors Roundtable with a World Recognition of Distinguished General Counsel Award. She's a strong supporter of all of TD's diversity initiatives and is chair of TD's Women in Leadership Committee. Wildly unaccomplished, apparently. Please join me in welcoming Nori to the stage.
Well, thank you to the Public Policy Forum for providing us with this opportunity tonight to celebrate so many wonderful leaders and trailblazers who've made a contribution to Canada with their belief that public and private, when we work together, can do many great things. And that belief is central to our work at TD. We know that our success depends on the success of our communities and of our country. And we also believe that with that success comes a responsibility to participate fund, advance, and help craft the programs and policies that will open up new opportunities for Canadians and their chance to thrive. In recognition of this, 2 weeks ago, TD took an important step forward in this effort. We sharpened our focus and made a commitment to the future. Our CEO, Bharat Masrani, announced this commitment to our shareholders at our annual meeting here in Toronto, and he highlighted it to all Canadians in an editorial in the Globe and Mail. But perhaps most importantly to me, he enlisted the support of our 85,000 enthusiastic colleagues across North America, a team that believes in our purpose, to enrich the lives of our customers, our colleagues, and our community. We call this the Ready Commitment, a comprehensive multi-year plan to bring the promise of tomorrow to millions of Canadians and communities across this country. For many of us in this room, technological innovation, new business models, urbanization, globalization, and shifting demographics represent opportunity. But for millions of our neighbors, these same dynamics can lead to real concerns or even fear. They wonder if they'll be professionally competitive in a digital world, and if they will have access to the health care they need for themselves and their families as they work hard to make ends meet. They're concerned about fragmentation of their communities, with digital connections replacing community connections and cultural connections at an alarming pace. And we all worry about our environment, that it cannot keep up with the progress around us, leaving us and our children with an even bigger problem to fix down the road. These and other issues are at the center of our Ready Commitment, and we'll add our voice and our resources to the effort. In fact, we're targeting a total of $1 billion by 2030 to fund initiatives that will help solve these issues. But one thing I know for certain is we cannot do it alone. We need your partnership, and we need the Public Policy Forum's expertise and ideas. And therefore, today we're announcing a new initiative. It's a 3-year partnership with the Public Policy Forum to explore ways in which Canadians can adapt and succeed in a changing workplace. And in partnership with you, we will try to get underneath the concerns faced by many to identify the root causes. Building a more inclusive future where millions can share in the opportunities before us is our collective focus. And that brings me to tonight's emerging leader, and I know this is a part you're going to want to hear. This is our Emerging Leader Award presentation. Creating an inclusive tomorrow is something of a mission for Caitlin Tolley, our 2018 recipient. And I'm thrilled to take just 1 minute to introduce her to you. Caitlin's interest in public policy combines her deep respect for her Algonquin heritage with her undeniable desire to serve. As a young Indigenous woman, she wanted to see her community participate fully in society. So she took action. At the age of 21, she became the youngest member in her community to serve on band council. She was soon after elected to the Assembly of First Nations Youth Council, and she has had the great privilege to intern with Senator Murray Sinclair, someone she considers to be an incredibly inspiring mentor. These and other early experiences instilled in her a burning desire to make life better for her community and for all of those around her. They reinforced her determination to ensure that Indigenous youth and women gain access to new opportunity, and importantly, to ensure their voice was heard. In Caitlin, we have a young Canadian who has already helped shape our future for the better, someone who is emerging as a leading voice in the efforts needed to support our Indigenous communities, and we can predict with confidence the impact she will make in years to come. Caitlin, we are all proud, but also indebted to you for the contributions you are making to improve lives and open doors, so please join me on stage to accept this year's Emerging Leaders Award.
Kwe kakina, Caitlin Tolin Indigenous, Kitigan Zibi Nindon Jiba. Migwech Kibijeg Nongom Onje Onakwashig. Ninga Animitagwaze. Migwech Onje Kipizindam. I spoke in my language because I wanted you all to hear how beautiful Anishinaabemowin is. The languages and the songs that we carry are thousands of years old. It is that ancestral knowledge that runs through my blood and through my veins and gets passed down from generation to generation. I am honored to be here this evening, and I shake hands with all of you. I acknowledge the ancestral soil of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people, whose territory we are all guests on tonight. I recognize that there are many youth back home in my community with faces that look like mine who also deserve the opportunity to be standing here. I carry with me their voices, their strength, and their resiliency. And when I stand in these places, I recognize that I do not only represent myself, but I have the responsibility of representing my family and my community, a responsibility that I do not take lightly. You see, I have a kinship relationship to my ancestral lands that comes with different layers of roles, responsibilities, and obligations. I am accountable to my community for the way that I carry myself. If I'm going to speak, I must only speak the truth. If I'm going to act, I must act in a humble way. And if I'm going to lead, I must lead by example, with courage and with bravery. So when thinking about the responsibility that I have to my community while I am standing here, I cannot help but think about the youth who, due to their life circumstances, may not ever have the opportunity to be in a room like this. I think of the children who did not come home from residential schools, the children who are currently in state care, the survivors who are victims of the 60s scoop, the youth in northern communities who have taken their own lives, the families of the women and girls who have gone missing or been murdered, and our brothers and sisters who are in prison. We need to do better as a country for them, and we must work to improve the lives of those who are not in this room tonight. I remain hopeful that together we can have uncomfortable conversations, we can challenge ourselves, and we can take courageous steps. Because each one of us in this room, we're in places of privilege, and we are accountable to them. And once you know the issues, you do not have the privilege of looking away. And most importantly, we cannot afford to give up hope, because the next generation is watching. And I will continue to remind the young people back home that their identity is their greatest source of strength. I will encourage them to continue living with fire in their hearts and to continue seeking justice in a country that does not always remember that we have been here since time immemorial. Because when I look into their eyes, I see myself. with a strong heart and a clear mind, I will continue to carry the voices of the young people back home, and now I carry all of you. Stars above me, earth below me, fire within me. Kichimi Gwachonje Gipazindam. Thank you very much for listening, and may the Creator bless your home fires.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was a lovely way to start the evening, hearing from her inspiring voice. And just as an aside, when Ed asked me to do this many, many months ago, the reason I said yes was not only because I love politics, but also I love public policy. Shh. And the one thing you all have in common here tonight, and you all have differences of opinion certainly, is you are all working to make this country better. So it's a privilege to be in the same room as all of you striving to do that. On to tonight's keynote speaker, Neil Turek. He is director of the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, so smarter than all of us. What you may wonder is why a physicist is here at a public policy celebration. Well, that's because you don't know Neil and you don't know the Institute, nor the new physics of competitiveness. I know nothing about that. He is originally from South Africa. He earned his PhD at Imperial College in London, professor of physics at Princeton. This is just going to make you feel bad, just so you know. Chair of mathematical physics at Cambridge before he started in his new role as director of Perimeter Institute in a place he had never heard of until well into adulthood. He epitomizes the kind of talent that Canada so desperately needs to attract back to this country that we seem to be doing. He is one of them. He has been awarded the John Torrance Tate Medal of the American Institute of Physics for international leadership in physics, as well as the James Clerk Maxwell Medal of the Institute of Physics in the UK for his work in cosmology. You may know him as a TED Prize winner and for his Massey lecture, book, and tour called The Universe Within, From Quantum to Cosmos. I bet the Prime Minister likes you. He's got a thing with quantum stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, Perimeter Institute's Neil Turek.
Thanks very much, Rosemary. And thank you to the many distinguished guests and dignitaries who've joined us this evening. This is quite an awesome crowd to speak to. Thank you, Ed Greenspon and the Public Policy Forum team for organizing this event to honor outstanding public service. And thank you also for allowing me the privilege of saying a few words tonight. I want to dedicate them to a very special person who saw great opportunity here in Canada. And here he is. Whoops. Here he is. On the shores of Lake Huron with Mike Lazaridis. Well, what brought Stephen Hawking to Canada? He cared very deeply about people and about the future. And he knew very well that physics drives progress. So when Mike started a center, Perimeter Institute, where the foundations of physics would be re-examined and renewed, Stephen understood very well, and he wanted to help. I don't know to what extent Mike fully appreciated it, but Canada's vast natural beauty provides the ideal backdrop for thinking about the universe. Its welcoming, forward-looking society is a magnet for talent. The sense of space and intellectual openness encourage big thinking. Great leaps forward in science have happened before, in ancient Greece, in 17th century Holland, and in 18th century Scotland. In each case, an island of reason was created next to a much more powerful neighbor, in a world plagued with crises. The Scottish Enlightenment fostered David Hume, Adam Smith, Robert Burns, James Watt, as well as brilliant physicists like Maxwell and Kelvin. Will Canada do the same? Could there be a Canadian Enlightenment? Well, I'm going to talk about physics because it's my field, but the lesson, I hope, is much broader. In the 1960s, Cambridge was the best place in the world for a young person like Stephen was at the time to do physics. Well, right now, the best place is here in Canada. On his first visit, Stephen said, "The importance of special places and special times where magical progress can happen cannot be overstated. Perimeter is a grand experiment in theoretical physics. I am hoping and expecting great things will happen here. No pressure." And what is our strategy? It's simplicity itself. Bring the most talented young people together and encourage them to shoot for the stars. No compromise on quality, on ambition, on objectivity, on the search for the truth. Canada right now is incredibly attractive. It has excellent public health and education. It has a diverse and I hope respectful society which promotes or should promote fairness, honesty, sustainability. Canada today can be an example and an opportunity for the world. Well, 9 years ago, we created a master's program at Perimeter aimed to become the best in the world. And today, Perimeter Scholars International, or PSI, that's an in-joke in physics, that's a wave function, receives more applicants per place than any other program in the world. And this year, no. This year, nearly 95% of our offers were accepted, against competition from top institutions like Cambridge, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford. In an increasingly competitive field and world, this success is unprecedented. Our experience echoes that in the Canadian tech sector, where similar battles to recruit innovators and entrepreneurs are succeeding. This is great for Canada's economy and for its society. I'd like to offer a big thank you to government for supporting fast-track immigration and for helping us to bring top talent here. So I'm afraid I can't resist talking a little about physics. And what I'm going to speak about is a discovery made last August by one of the most exciting and wonderful experiments of recent times. And so the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO, was an international collaboration. And last August, to their great surprise, this is what they saw. So the movie shows the collision of two neutron stars pulled together by their gravity, orbiting each other and emitting gravitational waves, which LIGO picked up. And as they lose energy into those waves, they spiral inwards and eventually collide. There's a gigantic nuclear reaction. Basically, the two neutron stars are nothing but large, very large nuclei, about 1 kilometer across each. And when they merge, and the energy release causes that giant flare, they throw all kinds of chemical elements into space. And so this is what that signal produced. You're only seeing part of the picture, I'm afraid. But it's the periodic table of elements. And the elements shown in orange, the fraction of each element shown in orange is due to processes like that neutron star collision. That wasn't understood until very recently, that gold, platinum, uranium are predominantly created in collisions of neutron stars like the ones we've just seen. And this event was a very dramatic confirmation of the international nature of science and the great unity of science. You see, it wouldn't have happened without gravitational waves. The two stars wouldn't have lost their energy and collided without the waves which were predicted by Einstein's theory of gravity. Now, the observation of that flash of gravitational waves was seen first by LIGO, and then they warned all the other telescopes around the world, and 50 different telescopes at all wavelengths, from X-rays to radio waves, observed the same event in multiple wavelengths and confirmed what was going on and measured the abundance of these heavy elements which were created in this process. We literally saw before our eyes the origin of the heavy elements, previously not understood. Gold, uranium, rare earths, in fact, many of the riches of the Canadian Shield. Actually, Canada is on the leading edge of this science, and some of our researchers in Canada are revolutionizing astronomy. One example is, I'm having trouble clicking forward. My slideshow has disappeared. There we go. Yeah, one example is the CHIME telescope in Penticton, BC. It's a new kind of radio telescope. It's a relatively cheap antenna, only $10 to $20 million, which is not a lot for such a powerful device. But what makes it special, it's connected to an extremely powerful computer, employing state-of-the-art algorithms, which essentially focus the telescope through software. These algorithms, designed in Canada, are capable of analyzing data in unprecedented volumes. And a similar telescope, called HIRAX, being assembled in South Africa with Canadian scientists again providing software, will consist of 1,000 radio dishes. And very exciting to me, as a South African, and an African, are the fact that there will be 2 outrigger telescopes in Botswana and Rwanda, which will create high-resolution images of extreme astrophysics phenomena like the ones we saw, allowing to solve other major mysteries about the universe and how we all got here. Well, uncompromising excellence is the key to good science. But excellence isn't enough. It must be accessible excellence, which allows everyone, the whole of society, to share in the wonder and the fun and the importance of discoveries like these. At Perimeter, we're very focused on leading-edge research, but we place an equal priority on educational and public outreach, on public lectures, summer programs for kids, and supporting teachers in schools. Well, Stephen Hawking was probably the most famous science communicator in the world. I think I'll remove the probably. So let me end with a little story about his second visit to Waterloo. One fine afternoon, he and I decided to take a walk in the park outside our institute. And as we went by the public playground, a 6-year-old kid started yelling, "That's Stephen Hawking!" But his mum told him it couldn't be. Well, next day I got an email saying to me from the kid's dad saying, "Was that really Stephen Hawking in the park?" And I replied, and it turned out this kid had read 5 of Stephen Hawking's books, and he desperately wanted to bring them in and have them signed by Stephen. So Stephen very graciously and very typically agreed, and this is their meeting. Now, what I love most about this picture is that they're wearing the same shirt. They're both little kids at heart, driven by curiosity and the desire to make sense of the world. Thank you for listening.
All right, next is a person you're all familiar with, the person who brought us here tonight, Edward Greenspan. Former journalist, foreign correspondent, editor, author, and now the president and CEO, of course, of the Public Policy Forum. In the 3 years that Ed has led the PPF, it has held countless events across the country to promote good public policy, because there is bad public policy, and has delivered major reports on issues such as Canada's troubled media industry, yes, I read that one, its effect on democracy, our energy future, and political financing. In all of these undertakings, he has embraced the PPF's motto, which is good policy, better Canada. Please take a look.
Good evening, everyone. I am Ed Talk Greenspan. Bonsoir et bienvenue à tous. Je m'appelle Edward Greenspan. Je suis PDG du Forum des politiques publiques. I want to take just a few minutes tonight. I'm going to try to make this few minutes to talk about the current state of democracy, a subject that occupies a lot of our time at the Public Policy Forum and our thinking, and I'm sure yours too. So let me just set this scene. Whoops, there we go. It was a bright, cold day in April, sounds familiar, and the clocks were striking 13. That's the chilling opening line of George Orwell's 1984. Nous sommes réunis ici ce soir, un groupe de gens fortunés. With some notable exceptions, most of us owe our good fortune to having grown up in a liberal democracy, where we enjoy the freedom to shape our personal future, and where we have the means to be informed and the institutions within which to manage our inevitable disagreements. Yet today, democracy is under tremendous stress around the world. Polarization over pluralism, strongmen over stateswomen, expediency over constitutionalism, truth often the first casualty of a new form of political war. Implicit in our PPF motto is that bad policy or inert policy making leads to poor outcomes, as we've seen elsewhere. That's why good governance and healthy democracy is one of our 5 areas of special concentration. Now, there's a familiar way democracy is attacked. For those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, reading those novels of Orwell, Bradbury, Kafka, Kessler, Solzhenitsyn, the threat came from authoritarianism and totalitarianism. As a European-based foreign correspondent in the late 80s and early 90s, I had the privilege of covering the demise of communism and of connecting the dots between ideas and people and ideas. I met with people throughout the Soviet bloc in cafes and church halls around their kitchen tables, and as they took back the streets from the likes of the Securitati and Stasi. I heard about the big and small ways the state had stripped them of dignity and eroded their trust in one another, and I watched as they relit the candle of freedom and reconstituted their broken civil societies. I recall meeting a young man in early 1989 after Sunday Mass in Warsaw. He was peddling Commodore 64 computers smuggled from Germany, which are old even then. I asked if he would get in trouble. Only, he said, if he sold modems. Unlike in a democracy, the thing that authorities feared most was people communicating with one another. Then there's the newer way democracy withers. In his wonderful 1985 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, still very relevant today, U.S. media academic Neil Postman put forward an alternative to the Orwellian view of democracy dying, one inspired instead by Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. In Huxley's world, Big Brother is not watching us. Instead, we choose to watch him, often for hours on end. Where Orwell feared those who would ban books, Huxley feared there would be no need, for there would be so few who would still want to read a book. Where Orwell feared the truth would be concealed from us, Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance and trivia. I'm sure this other danger to democracy sounds familiar. It comes from distraction, from disorientation, from the erosion of commonweal, those shared values, information, and purpose that bind democratic societies together. Huxley said, a really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which people do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude. Last year, the Public Policy Forum released a major study on the decline of news media called The Shattered Mirror, News, Democracy, and Trust in the Digital Age. We continue to work on how to counter the pollution of our concourses of communication by disinformation and hate, and the subdivision of the new digital public square by filter bubbles and echo chambers. We were pleased to see some movement in the budget, but the agents of disinformation are on the rise, and authentic journalism is in decline, and that's a bad combination. In recent weeks, we've heard a lot about the abuse of personal data for political purposes. This is serious stuff. But it is also just a subset of something much bigger going on. Although social media is an accelerant, we've already been busy amusing ourselves to death to the detriment of an informed and engaged citizenry. We are more connected than ever, but less committed. And here's where labor market disruption, as discussed at today's Canada Growth Summit, comes into the picture. Because a society in which work becomes less secure and incomes yet more unequal, and governments don't find ways to help people to adjust, is a fertile society for the rise of digitally enhanced populism. As you heard earlier, the future of work will be one of our other major areas of concentration over the next several years. And we're grateful for TD's vote of confidence, and we're eager to get to work with many of you. Canada needs far-sighted policymakers to represent the public interest and safeguard our precious social cohesion against those who would undermine them for reasons of profit or ideology or geopolitical advantage. Defending democracy always requires great leadership in times of stress. And so we are proud tonight to honor such far-sighted, unifying leaders as Beverly, Mark, and Richard, and to honor those who shine a critical light when we veer off course, such as Mary and Michael and Francine, and of course, those we count on to produce a more just and inclusive future, such as Caitlin. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been around the internet so long that I am culpable for this. The early version of globeandmail.com. I still believe in the internet, though, that like the printing press, it's an historic force that gives voice to new speakers and new ideas, such as with the Me Too movement, as an example. But it will take clarity by policymakers to ensure that individuals retain sovereignty over their personal information, that algorithms are accountable like editors, that platforms are obliged to take responsibility for what occurs within their domains, that news systems devoted to truth, even with a dash of the Kardashians, aren't allowed to fade away, and that the internet is a place of transparency and civility. Wow, that paper is still old-fashioned. On a grander scale, we need to be responsive to the dangers of distraction, disinformation, division. We need to make sure we don't succumb in our times to the opiate of amusing ourselves to death. I think it's probably best to think of Orwell and Huxley on a continuum. They both would agree on the foolhardiness of allowing the gift of democracy to be damaged, whatever the provocation. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is no 13th hour on the clock face of a healthy democracy. Let's be vigilant and keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I'm surprised he knows who Kim Kardashian is. That was wonderful. We're going to do one award, then you can have dinner. So that means you're all going to walk around and talk to each other. But then when I call you back, please come back. And this is the award that matters a lot to me. It's the Hyman Solomon Award for Journalism. At her core, Francine Pelletier is a storyteller. fearless, elegant, prolific, and she tells her stories through a feminist lens. So important right now. Cette reporter chevronnée est aussi une perle rare. Elle se distingue de ses collègues par sa capacité à interpréter à la fois le Canada anglais et français pour son public, et oui, c'est rare. Born in Ottawa and having lived most of her life in Montreal, Francine has, during her more than 30-year career, that is not over, far from it, worked in French and English in print and broadcast. What she is good at saying is, here are the uncomfortable truths. That, according to Graham Fraser, the former journalist and former federal commissioner of official languages. What stands out, he says, is her trajectory in feminism. During her years as an investigative journalist and co-host of CBC's The Fifth Estate, she told difficult stories, such as reporting on the sweatshops of Latin America and the legacy of killer Marc Lépine. À présent, elle signe une chronique hebdomadaire incontournable pour Le Devoir. Elle est régulièrement invitée à RDI. Elle enseigne aussi lors de l'entrevue aux étudiants de journalisme de l'Université de Concordia. She is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, chronicling the lives and sometimes difficult personalities of well-known Canadians such as Mordecai Richler and Jacques Parizeau. All this, and Francine still calls herself a classic poor freelancer. Le féminisme a toujours orienté son travail. In 1980, long before any Canadian Prime Minister called himself a feminist, Francine founded the feminist newspaper La Vie en Rose. C'était une époque passionnante au Québec. Elle travaillait pour son journal durant une période où le féminisme avait le vent en poupe et où les Québécois réclamaient l'indépendance. Et tous deux étaient des mouvements de libération. To start a publication with just a bunch of women with no boss and no obligations and no one telling you what to do, it was a heady experience, she has said. We had the feeling that we were able to change things, and we were happy and quite bold, and it was a great time. But with the great times have come dark times too. In 1989, Francine was a columnist at La Presse when Marc Lépine killed 14 women at l'École Polytechnique. She was shocked by the denials and reaction to the massacre, that it was not about violence against women, and she recognized this as a backlash against feminism. After that, she says, feminism more or less went underground. Francine was one of 19 women on Lépine's target list, the list of women, all of them, identified in a suicide letter as those he wanted dead. Outraged by that coverage and by the denial around the massacre, Francine set out to find out what else was in that suicide note. It wasn't easy. She was blocked at every turn until finally, almost a year to the day of that massacre, the letter arrived anonymously in her mailbox. Elle a fait en sorte que cette lettre soit publiée. On pouvait y lire la haine que Marc Lépine éprouvait envers les femmes. La vérité sur cet acte horrible était enfin révélée. Francine affirme que c'est sa plus grande réalisation. We would say there are many others. Mesdames et messieurs, une journaliste féministe, courageuse, Francine Pelletier.
Merci Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie. Rosemary. Excuse-moi. It is an impressive crowd. I hear your 1,300 listening to me right now. It's a pleasure to be back in Montreal, if only for a night, and it's a real thrill for me. Toronto? Oh. Am I in Toronto? How did that happen? It's a pleasure to be back in Toronto. Be still my beating heart. And a real thrill to be in the company of such distinguished guests, including two women I have long admired, Mesdames Beverly McLaughlin and Mary Walsh. In fact, I once had the pleasure of interviewing Mary Walsh about her sex life. Que de souvenirs. I was working on a 6-part series on women and sexuality, and Mary Walsh, always the brave one, was willing to spill the beans, so to speak. So I am not the only courageous woman in this room tonight by any stretch of the imagination. I'm, of course, extremely honored to be this year's Hyman Solomon Award winner, a man I never knew. In fact, I had to look him up. Two solitudes oblige, you know. Luckily, Graham Fraser, who happens to be the first recipient of the Hyman Solomon Award, filled me in. I'm afraid he's not here tonight. It seems that Hy, as he was known, was quite the independent thinker, which in my book is the absolute best thing you could say about anyone, and certainly a label I would love to claim. He was also able to throw his weight around. He apparently wrote something that eventually compelled Prime Minister Brian Mulroney to apologize about unflattering comments he had made about the first openly gay member of Parliament, remember him, Sven Robinson. Now, I'm sorry to say I have not yet gotten any prime minister or premier or politician to apologize about anything, though, believe me, I'm trying. There are a lot of things that I am passionate about. Women, of course, not just women, the way we treat minorities in general and people, minorities in particular, and people in general. The heartbreaking state of the environment, and the state, the also sometimes heartbreaking state of our democracy are all very big concerns of mine. In fact, I was struck by something a former editor of the Wall Street Journal and now columnist with the New York Times, Bret Stephens, wrote recently, and I just quoted him in this week's my last column. How do you measure a country's greatness? It's the question that Stephens is trying to answer in this essay. The first measure of greatness, according to him, is the way we treat foreigners or people who aren't exactly like us. How we accommodate la différence is, for me, too, paramount. The second measure of greatness, by the way, according to Bret Stephens, happens to be independent thinking, which brings me back to Hyman Solomon. I can't, of course, pretend having the same weighty pen as Mr. Solomon or his influence, but you know, it takes receiving a prize like this to think that maybe, just maybe, you are making a difference. So again, I'm truly honored by this award. And speaking of making a difference, I feel that I might not be standing here tonight if it weren't for the extraordinary battalion of women known as the Me Too movement that has given a whole new luster to the word feminist and to the whole idea of standing up and being counted. I can't tell you how wonderful this feels, standing here as if riding a huge wave of women, all with their little fists in the air. Almost as wonderful as being called passionate, progressive, and fearless, which is how I believe my candidacy was presented to the Public Policy Forum. I want that on my tombstone. Passionate, progressive, and fearless. Wow, it doesn't get better than that. So again, thank you, Rosemary, for a great introduction, to the selection committee, to Graham Fraser, and of course to Ed Greenspan and the Public Policy Forum. And à vous tous, messieurs, mesdames, d'être ici ce soir. Merci d'être là.
This concludes the first part of the evening. Enjoy your dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The second half of the program is about to begin.
We're going to do this again now. They're terrible, aren't they? Yeah. Do whatever you want to do. You own this. This is your dinner. Come. Okay. Okay. We're going to sit down. I don't even think the microphone's on. Yeah, people are sitting on the stage. All right, we're going to get this show on the road here because there are many, many things left. If you would please take your seat again. Bill Morneau listens really well. He does. No, you do. You're good. No, it's good. Thank you. Hi. There's a video for the next cue. So I just, do I do anything? I'll get them sitting down and then you'll hit it? Thank you. Okay, take a seat, ladies and gentlemen. We might just play the video, and then they'll be forced to be quiet. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to do it. Let's hit the video.
There's nothing better that could happen than to be scandalous, to be provocative.
And good luck with everything and breaking up my country.
Oh, sure, who's gonna care what kind of a weasel fest his leadership race was then?
We demand that the Government of Canada force Stockwell Day to change his first name to Doris.
Marg, Princess Warrior! Through Marg, I could say the unspeakable. Let's face it, if Paul Martin Jr., Sheila Copps and John Manley are the best that a country of 30 million can come up with, well, God help us, because there's something really wrong in the Canadian gene pool. Mr. Cow Dung would melt in your mouth. We were on the cover of Maclean's magazine. Mr. Cow Dung would melt in your mouth. We were on the cover of Maclean's magazine. We were called the official opposition.
I know. We'd call it democracy.
You know who I blame? Brian Mulroney.
Did you just endorse
She
Michael
just
Chong?
endorsed Michael Chong
Sounded like to me.
on my crappy panel.
I had no idea that when he said it was rigged, that he was confessing.
Yeah, am I flinching every time I say immigrants? Yeah, okay, I'll try and stop. And it is important that we screen immigrants for Canadian values. I did it again, didn't I?
Kingston Penitentiary has closed down. What's going to happen to those people? Are they going to go directly into the Senate?
There's nothing that strikes fear in the hearts of politicians more than seeing the logo "This Hour Has 22 Minutes" coming at you.
You big baby! Come on, we just want to talk about fashion. John Baird just ran away from me.
Next time you come up with a plan to save the country, if Preston Manning agrees with it,
Yes.
go the other way.
Where around here can I come? You're kidding. You didn't bring that into front of me. As long as one... I'm not going to hotbox my office. No way.
Golf is such a forgiving game, isn't it?
Sure.
Just like politics, what? You screw up and you just go, that's a mulligan, I'm going to do it again.
CSIS won't help you now, sir.
And the goal of this show, literally from the beginning, was to try to get cancelled after 2 years. In fact, during the Harper phase, I thought I would.
It's hard to become a national party if you're pretty well against everything and everyone in the nation. You're against gays and lesbians, you're against the East Coast, you're against Quebec.
Now there's a Prime Minister who will cancel us.
Not bad, a little cold.
To make Rosie feel at home, would you mind joining me as we talk over her?
Well, I don't like what you're
Look, I don't know if I don't see now. And of course, look, if you look province to province, moving along.
I've had it with you.
Not yet. I get to say some stuff now. I don't really have to. Man, when you kiss Stephen Harper. Did he give you tongue? Mary Walsh is famous for dressing up like a warrior princess, as you saw, arming herself with a plastic sword and accosting our political leaders. Weaponizing humor in the cause of keeping the powerful humble was all in a day's work for her. She told Stephen Harper to loosen up. He clearly did. She grilled Kathleen Wynne about Liberal scandals. She played golf with Chrétien. She ambushed Mike Duffy. She was audacious and fearless and with a point. All this delighted Michael Donovan, the co-creator with Walsh of This Hour Has 22 Minutes, the wildly popular satirical political show that is celebrating, get this, its 25th anniversary this year. Donovan delights in seeing pomposity having its balloon pricked, and Walsh provides the edge. For a quarter century, week after week, the revolving cast of 22 Minutes has, and this is true, influenced public policy in this country. The Stockwell Day thing, I was just talking to Rick about it last week. It's embarrassed politicians, and perhaps less understood, it has really blazed the trail for satire in North America. Jon Stewart, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, they owe this show a debt of gratitude. A few writers from 22 Minutes have in fact found their ways to the United States. Mary Walsh, as you know, is a Newfoundlander. Michael Donovan is a Blue Noser, and they are both fiercely proud of their Atlantic roots. All the funny people come from there. Since its inception in 1993, 22 Minutes has remained anchored in Halifax, and so the politics of the country have been seen and interpreted through this Atlantic Canada lens. Michael Donovan has no particular political axe to grind, but he possesses a mischievous streak. He looks normal, but he has a wicked sense of humor and a strong belief in the value of satire and open debate. He once told Mark Critch, another friend, "I will only be happy with the show when a member of parliament is standing in the House denouncing it and demanding it be torn from the airwaves." Not yet. Mr. Donovan is now CEO of DHX Media, one of the largest distributors of children's programming in the world. Is also an Oscar winner, which I did not know, bringing home the Academy Award in 2003 for Best Documentary Feature. I didn't realize you had also done that. Bowling for Columbine. He is a man of many theories, often prefacing his answers with, maybe, "I have a theory." Yeah. Or ending them with, "Of course, that is just my theory. I could be wrong." More often than not, though, he is right. Early on, he told the crew at 22 minutes that it would last 22 seasons, and he was laughed at. Now he's going for the record to try and beat Front Page's 38-year run on CBC. And then there's Mary, actor, writer, voracious consumer of news. She has an opinion on pretty much everything. She's a brilliant writer, an actor with a perfect sense of timing. She's never satisfied or boring. She is as inquisitive as she is opinionated. And she is generous in helping advance the careers of many of Canada's young actors. And of course, she is an advocate for mental health. She has spoken frankly about addiction to alcohol and wanting to end the stigma around mental health issues. Like so many in her industry, she possesses that curious and enigmatic combination of fearlessness and terror, pacing and nervous as a cat before she is about to ambush her political target. Rob Ford never was the same after that. When the red light came on, she was always there, for always being there to make us laugh, make us think, and hold the rest of you to account. We honor Mary Walsh and Michael Donovan.
We ran out of applause before we got
I know, they're terrible.
Thank you, Rosie. It's a wrap.
I get to go first here because I'm the least funny here. In fact, I'm totally boring. Thank you very much, Ed. This is an amazing night you've put together, all the decision makers in Canada. I'm privileged to be part of this, and thank you for the Public Policy Forum group. Everybody has worked very hard. It's amazing, 1,300 people. I found Neil Turok's speech tonight very inspiring, particularly when he said that Stephen Hawking was the most effective, or probably the most effective, communicator in the world of science. But I found myself thinking that Neil is the most passionate communicator of science in the world. And we in Canada are very lucky to have some passion in our country, because Canadians are not normally known for passion. We're known for seriousness. We're known for our sincerity, of which there is a tremendous abundance, as I'm seeing tonight, for example. And that's exactly why our show has lasted for actually 26 years, because it's very easy to make fun of very serious, sincere people, which is all of Canada. And there's a standard joke in the world of comedy, which is that life is easy, comedy, that's hard. That's a very commonly stated joke amongst comedians. It's one of those things everyone says. And 26 years ago, when we started this show, writing comedy in Canada was a little bit hard, not very hard, but a little bit. Today, it's much, much easier. Ridiculously easy. That's why the show has lasted long. By the way, members of the CBC are in this room tonight, and I really shouldn't be saying this. This is the easiest job in the world. Our job of being satirists has become easiest. The jokes write themselves. And that's exactly why our show has lasted. Ridiculousness around the world has grown exponentially. For example, 52% of the population of Britain, 67% in Hungary, 80% in Russia. But my favorite example is Italy. Appropriate because that's where the Divine Comedy was written. The most popular party there, the one that's going to form the government, was created by a comedian. Imagine a comedian running a whole country. What do you think of that? In that case, actually, we would have no job left. When the fool becomes the king, who will perform the pantomimes, put on the naughty shows, utter the foul fart jokes? The king? However, in this room, we needn't worry because Mary and I are not planning political careers. Or rather, I'm not. That's not to say that politicians are not professional actors. Many are. But very few are good comedians. But I've decided that that's exactly the whole problem. That if everyone in Parliament just simply told jokes all day long, maybe everyone would be happier. And I believe that's exactly why the White House is working so well these days. And why they haven't done anything serious, like, say, invade North Korea. What's the hesitation? Can't they see the funny in it? Now, North Korea, that's a society that would benefit definitely from more comedy. Which prompts me to make at least one, because this is a very serious room and a very serious gathering, I'm going to make one serious, very serious comment tonight. And there's something that's puzzled me, and I've been very confused lately by this, and that's the strange correlation between bad leadership and bad haircuts. By the way, I noticed in that picture that I had hair a number of years ago. That was, and probably when I had hair, I was more sensible. But John F. Kennedy, now he had sensible hair, but we have the Donald, and that's a haircut that has a personality of its own, I think. I've even heard that the hair is giving him military advice. What's curious is nobody talks about the hair anymore. I have only one thing to say about that: sad. The reason is because it's been trumped by much funnier things, like removing troublesome bishops, heads of the FBI, special prosecutors, the usual. Fortunately, in Canada, we have a prime minister who has very sensible hair. That's a relief. But I want to thank the Public Policy Forum for this evening, and I want to thank the CBC for staying behind 22 minutes. 22 minutes would not have happened. We would have been cancelled 24 years ago if it was not for the CBC. CBC is a unique institution, so I want to bring that to attention tonight. Thank you. And I want to thank the hundreds of people who have worked on 22 Minutes and contributed, the creators. But I mostly want to thank this great, great Canadian here, who I've had the privilege of working with for 26 years.
Longer.
So longer, to 30 years, because we did
30
Codco together, an old TV series. Last but not least, I want to thank our audiences in Halifax. The show is a success because of those Halifax audiences. Maritimers, Atlantic Canadians have a unique sense of humor. Half the show is the audience. The audience writes the show. So, thank you. Mary.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you, of course. This is a great honor, and I'm really honored to be here. I just want to argue with Michael a little bit. He says that it's much easier to write comedy now. I think it's much harder to write comedy now. I think, you know, when I see that tiny-handed, pin-dicked, Muslim-banning, Mexican-hating, pussy-grabbing, talking yam on the TV, I can't think comedy. I think I want to haul the eyeballs out of his head and pop them up his behind so that even he can see how big of an arsehole he really is. But I realize, of course, there's no point to that because he already knows how big of an arsehole he is, and he doesn't care. That's the thing. It's like my favorite Newfoundland joke. There was a guy from St. John's who was looking for a horse. He went down to Fairyland. He saw this beautiful meadow flowing down to the ocean with one white horse in the middle of it. He found the farmer. The farmer said he'd sell it to him. He called over here, Dobbin. There's only one thing in the middle of the meadow, a big tree. Dobbin comes galloping across the meadow, boom, whacks himself right in the head in the tree. Buddy from St. John's is outraged. He goes, "What are you at? You're trying to sell me a blind horse." Buddy from Fairland says, "No, boy," he says, "Dobbin's not blind, he just don't give a fuck." and neither apparently does Mr. Trump. Anyway, it's gobs of fun, of course, to always be looking over there. It's like when I used to drink, I always made sure I went out drinking with someone who was a lot worse than me, because I go, "Oh, I'm bad. I'm not as bad as Murr." I didn't end up in the lockup. But this year, for the sesquicentennial, I was given the opportunity to do a show, a musical review show that I wrote with Thomas King, with Quantum Tangle, who won the Best Indigenous Album in 1917. Thank you, Mary. No, 2017. With Marie Clement and with an extraordinary group of people. And I learned, it was like an eye-opening experience for me. I used to always say, without really thinking, I'd say, well, you know, John Cabot discovered Newfoundland and Jacques Cartier discovered Canada. And I read this quote from a Dene chief who said, "It's really hard to discover a place that's already fully occupied." He said, "It'd be like if I decided to go over and discover England," you know? And it had never really, and I always think of myself as woke, you know, but it had never even occurred to me that I was just talking like that, right? Anyway, I did learn quite a lot from doing that. And Canada's great genius, Northrop Frye, said a people is formed by its geography. And just look at us. I mean, we are rotted out with geography. We're practically choked on oceans. We got 3 of them. We got the big awe-inspiring, that huge northern mystery behind us, and 9,984,677 square kilometers of good earth. We are the second largest landmass in the entire world. Hegel said that all that history has taught us is that man learns nothing from history. But our own Northrop Frye said that we learn everything from our geography. And here we are, a people faced with an embarrassment of geographic riches. We have so much room to be accepting, to be tolerant, to throw open our arms, to be generous, room to celebrate all the things we did right, and room and time to fix all the mistakes we made in the past, room to be large in our dealings with the world and with each other. And to celebrate, as Emily Carr said, how wonderful it is to feel the grandness of Canada in the raw. Not because she is Canada, but because she is something sublime that we were lucky enough to be born into, some great rugged power that we are part of, thanks largely to our Indigenous brothers and sisters who, when the Europeans first arrived, they taught us how to live in this beautiful, forbidding glory of a country. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So probably the first time pussy and arsehole have been said here, right? But like sort of makes it better. All right, Richard, you have to follow this. Our next honoree is Richard Discerny. He's funny in a different way. He's a man of integrity and purpose who has described himself as a serial monogamist. That's nice, Richard. His relationships with governments, however, were a little bit more adventurous. In a nearly 50-year public service career, Richard has worked in senior roles in Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, serving NDP, Liberal, Conservative, Progressive Conservative governments on the way, so he's easy. He's a lover of governments and loyal to them all, able to gain the trust and respect of elected officials, regardless of where they're coming from. He doesn't discriminate. And in this way, Richard epitomizes what it means to be a public servant, a loyal servant offering sound and fearless advice, which is why I'd never met him before. Behind the scenes guy. Throughout his career, he has been committed to ensuring the political decision makers always had options that integrated their political orientation and public interest. He has focused on nurturing talent to make sure the public service continues to improve, on improving accountability. You don't have to walk very far in a capital city in Canada, in fact, before bumping into someone that Richard has spoken to or mentored. He's done all that. He's also been witness to and a player in much of Canada's history. Constitutional crises, we're having another one, apparently. Rachel Notley says so. To economic collapses. He is, as all good public servants, as I said, he works in the background and he works his magic behind the curtains. He's a francophone born and raised in Montreal. He was one of the architects of the federal strategy to beat René Lévesque in the 1980 referendum. He was 31. I wasn't doing that at 31. He would go on to serve that guy over there, Bob Rae's NDP government in Ontario, and then a very different one led by Mike Harris. And he helped Premier Harris navigate the lead up to the 1995 Quebec referendum. And in its aftermath, he worked with Quebec officials in Premier Lucien Bouchard's office to try and establish a relationship between the governments that would help the Federation work better. For a short time, he was also president and CEO of the Canadian Newspaper Association because he loved the industry, but also bright lights. And he left to join the Ontario Power Generation, leading the utility for 2 years. In 2006, he moved back to Ottawa, and he rejoined the Canadian government as Deputy Minister of Industry. He served there until his retirement in 2012. You'll see why. He didn't actually like retirement, as it turns out, and so he was unretired in 2014 when he went to work for the late Jim Prentice. And he went to Alberta to work as the Deputy Minister of the Executive Council in Alberta. And his job there was to try and rebuild a weak and demoralized public service. Not long after, the Tories were defeated, but not Mr. Discerny. He was asked by the NDP Premier, Rachel Notley, to stay on and help with a very unique transition in Alberta, as you know, after 44 years of progressive Conservative governments. Once again, he finally retired in 2016, but I talked to him before this dinner, and he says he's still not retired, so I don't know. His friend and a colleague, Brian Topp in Alberta, a confidant as well, says this: he may be the closest thing that the Canadian public service has to a cat. He has 9 lives and always lands on his feet. Ladies and gentlemen, to his 10th life, let me present Richard Discerny.
Thank you. As Rosemary mentioned, being a public servant, I don't have that much experience of speaking in public. So you'll have to bear with me as I plod my way through these 5 minutes. J'aimerais d'abord remercier le Forum des politiques publiques pour m'avoir permis de partager cette tribune ce soir avec tous les autres récipiendaires. Ils ont tous, chacun à leur façon, nous ont inspirés. Ils ont tous fait une contribution assez exceptionnelle au pays. Ils nous ont fait réfléchir, ils nous ont fait rire, mais surtout, ils ont accru notre sens de fierté d'être Canadiens. C'est qu'évidemment, je suis très privilégié d'être parmi eux ce soir. Si on veut réussir dans le type de job que j'ai eu là, au cours de ma carrière, il est important, puis je dirais même il est essentiel, d'être appuyé par sa famille. Deuxièmement, de gagner la confiance des élus. Et troisièmement, de s'entourer d'excellents collaborateurs. Je voudrais ce soir témoigner de mon appréciation à leur égard. Donc, en commençant avec ma famille, je voudrais d'abord saluer ma mère, Jeannette Discerny, qui est ici présente. C'est elle. C'est elle qui m'a donné le goût de l'aventure, sans jamais avoir peur du lendemain. C'est elle qui m'a toujours appuyé, sans réserve, sans condition. Elle est toujours là. Ça fait qu'évidemment, je lui dois un premier merci. Secondly, my children, Suzanne, Patrick. They have for so many years filled me with pride. There's no greater pleasure as a parent than be able to observe the substantial achievements on a personal and professional basis of one's children. Suzanne and Patrick are wonderful, wonderful individuals who make me proud every day to be called their dad. I also wish to acknowledge my sister, my friend, Caroline, and my first grandchild, Jack Washburn, who has never met a book he did not love. They are really special people. Professional achievements and recognitions, such as this evening's event, are important and they're obviously quite gratifying. But if they are to be appreciated to their full extent, they need to have, as a fellow traveler, the support and the love and affection of a great spouse. Carol Swan is my wife, my traveling buddy, and my very best friend. She was also a very senior public servant who throughout her career, 30 years, sought to make a difference and be a role model for young women in the public service. So my first thank you is to my family, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. My second group of thank you is to the premiers, the ministers, prime ministers who have given me the opportunity to provide advice on policies and programs that support the public interest. Political leaders do not have an obligation to take counsel on the basis of the organizational chart. Giving advice, I've always thought was a unique privilege of being a senior public servant. Over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity, as Rosemary mentioned, to work at and earn the trust of NDP, Liberal, and Conservative political leaders. Churchill said that democracy may not be the best system, but it is by far the best of the alternatives. The major ingredient that makes democracy work, in my view, is that individuals are willing to stand for office. So tonight I want to express my appreciation to those individuals, and there are many in the room, who have stood for office. Being an elected political leader has a number of rewards, including the opportunity to pursue and enhance the public interest. But it also has costs that more often than not go unnoticed. Very few Canadians appreciate the number of special, important moments that have been missed because a minister was called away for a duty, for a meeting, for a cabinet session. Let it be family birthdays that were missed, parent-teacher interviews, hockey tournaments, special holidays, or more generally, just not being able to be there when one was needed. So on behalf of all people who believe in democracy, I want to thank people who stand for elected office and are prepared to defend their cause. My third set of thank yous is for all the people who, over the years, have worked with me, be it in Ottawa, Queen's Park, Ontario Power Generation, or Government of Alberta more recently. I obviously would not be here tonight had it not been for the tremendous dedication, hard work of the senior executives and public servants who supported me throughout my career. Public service at senior levels is challenging and it's fulfilling, but it can also be brutal and it can be unfair. We as Canadians are fortunate that competent and dedicated individuals across the country continue to serve the public interest. Je termine en vous soulignant le grand honneur, le sens de fierté que j'ai toujours ressenti à être un haut fonctionnaire. Servir l'État, mes concitoyens, a toujours été pour moi un privilège. So, thank you, Ed. Thank you to the Public Policy Forum for this evening and for the opportunity to share my thoughts on public service and the importance of love and family. Merci.
I think we all fell in love with Richard. I sure did. All right, Mark Carney knows how to make an entrance. When he arrived in the UK in 2013 to take up this new job, it's a pretty big job, Governor of the Bank of England, he was greeted with this headline. He might remember it: heavy metal fan to run Bank of England. And then this one: headbanger, power player, outsider. British press greets Carney. Oh, the Brits. Headbanger, heavy metal fans. Doesn't quite work, does it? But they're not actual, like, esoteric central banking practices. Apparently, the governor has never quite shaken his reputation when he was an undergrad at Harvard for cranking up AC/DC's Back in Black before hockey games. Power player? Okay, that goes without saying. Outsider? Actually, that too. He is, in fact, the quintessential outsider. Let me tell you why. His status was confirmed at birth. He was actually born in Fort Smith, the Northwest Territories. His family later moved to Edmonton. He still cheers for the Oilers. There's no leafy central Canadian suburb. He doesn't talk about the Habs or the Leafs. And then there's the way he came to the Bank of Canada. David Dodge, I thought I saw him earlier. The governor at the time had Mark in his sights when he was casting about for a new deputy governor. He wanted a banker who knew equity markets, and Mark, who was a private banker at the time, longed for more substantive work in the public sphere, wanted to do public policy. Again, the outsider, the private banker, became part of the inner circle, joining the Bank of Canada, and a little later, about a year later, he was seconded to finance, where he worked with two ministers, Ralph Goodale and Jim Flaherty. As Globe and Mail journalist Sinclair Stewart wrote in his profile of the central banker, he is that rarest of species in public policy, an outsider nurtured not within the bureaucracy, but in the investment banking world that had been at the epicenter of the meltdown. Yes, he became governor of the Bank of Canada in 2008. Quickly facing the worst global economic downturn since the Depression. Perhaps as a goaltender, it was in his nature to get well-positioned. He was clear-eyed in seeing where the world economy was heading, and he was well-prepared. Just 1 month, I didn't realize it was only 1 month into his term, the bank became a very early mover by cutting the overnight rate by 50 basis points. And as the situation worsened, and it certainly did, with interest rates already close to zero in 2009, he made a simple, bold, disciplined move, a verbal commitment to hold rates steady as long as inflation stayed quiet. And that public guidance from a place that isn't always giving public guidance gave confidence to credit markets and consumers to get the economy moving again. In 2013, he became the first non-Brit in the 300-plus year history of the Bank of England to be appointed governor. And so it was a calm and confident Canadian who, in anticipating the economic consequences of a leave vote and having a plan for it, became, again, a face of reassurance, this time for the people of the United Kingdom after the Brexit vote and the chaos that followed and follows still. He had planned to leave the bank in 2018, but he has thrown them a bone and extended his tenure by a year to try and provide, again, more stability in the wake of Brexit. Mark has also been active in raising the risks to financial markets from not properly accounting for climate change. From the Occupy Wall Street movement forward, he has also talked broadly, just talked about it before this dinner with me, about income inequality. He and his wife Diana have held on to their home in Ottawa, and he insists he is planning to return to Canada once his term is up. Perhaps we can convince him with a nudge tonight. Says David Dodge, in his heart and in his spirit, Mark is very much a Canadian. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're calling a Canadian outsider insider, Mark Carney.
Okay. God, tough acts, very tough acts to follow. That was very kind. And I'm glad that you started with David Dodge, because I would like to start my thank yous with David somewhere. I know he's somewhere here. He's actually a hard guy to miss. There he is. For taking a chance on me and bringing me into the public service, but providing an example to all of us throughout his career. So thank you, David. And thank you, Ed, and thank you to the Public Policy Forum for this honor. Thank all of you for enduring a speech from a central banker after what you've heard. And, you know, I was wondering, a few weeks ago, I started to get a little nervous about this. It sounded like a good idea about 2 years ago when you raised it. I started to get a little nervous about this, and I thought, you know, I can't just come there and show up and get the gong. I got to talk about a big issue. I need a big issue. Neil took the biggest issue. Mary took my joke, you know, so what am I going to do? But I was walking a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking by. Literally, there's a guy who's in Edinburgh, and he's selling the big issue. So I buy the big issue. The big issue, of those of you who go in the UK, is a magazine which is sold on behalf by the homeless for the homeless. So it's a way to scratch a meager income and shore up a bit of dignity. And it's actually quite it's quite a good publication. And my favorite feature in the big issue is a letter to my younger self. So they get an assortment of sort of random personalities to write letters to their younger selves. And these letters tend to have a wistfulness to them, a sense of lost opportunity or, you know, good fortune that wasn't appreciated at the time. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Our own Margaret Atwood wrote, "I tell my younger me, forget the melodrama, it'll be okay." Sound advice. The issue I bought, Will I Am. See, Mary, I am more of a, Rosemary, I'm more of a Will I Am than Angus and those other guys in the short pants. So Will I Am advises his younger self, when your knees buckle, crawl, roll, do not give up. Again, good advice. And this other one, beware your naive confidence in your own marvelousness. It's going to take some serious knocks. Actually, that was Flaherty's letter to me before I went to the UK. Look, the issue with these letters is because time doesn't move backwards, it's too late for those authors who write the letters to take their own advice. It's certainly too late for me to take the great Jim Flaherty's advice on whether I should move to the UK. Another outstanding public servant I would like to know, Jim Flaherty. But these letters can still be useful. They're useful for the young if they're read. And what follows might have some small impact if anyone in this truly cavernous hall, fortified by Niagara Chardonnay and increasingly anxious about catching the last Porter flight home, is still listening. And I will say, Ed, I heard 45 minutes, not 4 to 5 minutes. This is, just briefly, this is a letter to my younger nation, or what I wish Canada would know now that Britain has long felt in its bones. And it starts really, we live, and I think we feel this to various degrees, in an age of disruption, and those disruptions are from social mores to the nature of work to our very climate. And with them, there are some enormous positives. 1 milliard de personnes sorties de la pauvreté, la totalité de la connaissance humaine disponible à 4 milliards, et l'espérance de vie accrue de 2 décennies. But despite such immense progress, many citizens in advanced economies are lamenting loss of control and losing trust in the system. To them, measures of aggregate progress bear little relation to their own experiences, and rather than a new golden era globalization and technological change, are associated with low wages, insecure employment, as Ed said earlier, stateless corporations, and striking inequalities. And it goes deeper, because as the British know from their history, every technological revolution mercilessly destroys jobs and therefore livelihoods and therefore identities. Remember where Caitlin started? Well before new ones emerge. This was true of the eclipse of agriculture by the Industrial Revolution, the displacement of manufacturing by the service economy, and now the hollowing out of middle-class jobs by automation and global sourcing. And this process can lead to either nationalism or patriotism. And all too often, the former, the ready, vicious default is chosen. Us versus them, the people versus the elite, the virtuous and the damned. But of course, it doesn't have to be this way, but it will be without radical action. Patriotism is earned by countries whose actions live up to their values. And that's what Canada gets right, because this is a country that doesn't just talk about inclusive growth. It's a country where all of us, policymakers, businesses, and the third sector, recognize responsibilities for delivering opportunities for all. And the challenges of our age, the difficulties, actually disguise breathtaking opportunities for this country. Job-destroying machine learning can unleash our creativity and our empathy. A smart, cooperative transition to a low-carbon economy can optimize all of Canada's energy resources. Et cette nouvelle finance permettant de relier Saskatoon à Shanghai, La Beauce à Bangalore. Of course, to seize these opportunities, Canada can't take for granted either the capitalism that has created so much for so many or the social capital on which it depends. We must continue to celebrate and reward private initiative while building a system that provides opportunities for all. And this holds for people and the provinces that represent them, for the co-ops and companies that serve them. It holds from unions to YouTube, from businesses to boffins. Forget the melodrama. Our job is to build, not to bicker. So crawl, roll, do not give up. We owe it to all of those who cannot conceive of evenings such as tonight. And that is what I would like to have known if I were still young and running to the sound of gunfire. But with this honor, I'm going to write letters, not read them. Et de mes mains faibles, je vous passerai le flambeau. Merci à tous. Thank you very much for this.
Should I ask him if he's going to run in the next election? Just putting it out there. Beverly McLaughlin is our next honoree. She's a woman well known to Canadians for the strength of her convictions as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the ferocity with which she protected the independence of the court. She is the longest-serving Chief Justice in the country's history, occupying the position from January 2000 until her, again, retirement last December. Her mark on Canada, though, will last many, many generations. As I said, it's been a short-lived retirement. A couple of weeks ago, it was announced that Ms. McLaughlin was joining Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal as one of the non-permanent members from a common law country, and she becomes the first Canadian ever to join the 20-member court. Again, just making history. Prolific and precise, Ms. McLaughlin's judgments and leadership of the High Court redefined the post-charter era for Canadians. It's the humanity in every case that is so important to me, and it always has been, she told the Globe and Mail's Sean Fine in an interview just before she retired. In many ways, her influence flowed from the sharpness of her pen. Under her leadership, judgments became concise, clear, accessible, written in a manner that all Canadians, even this journalist, could understand. Whether a judge on a lower court, a lawyer, a client, anyone bound by a court decision could read it and get what it would mean for them. Working hard to get the law right in a way that Canadians would understand underlines the enduring legitimacy of the court. The acceptance by Canadians of very difficult decisions, a recognition of same-sex marriage, defining physician-assisted death, pushing back on mandatory minimums, these were all hugely assisted by efforts by Beverly McLaughlin to make the court more accessible and more relatable. She is a prolific writer and the author of many judgments, such as the one that knocked down the country's prostitution laws, an earlier one that supported a safe injection site in Vancouver, which the federal government had wanted to shut down. And on a personal note, when I interviewed her as she left her position, she spoke passionately about the things that she did for the Indigenous peoples of this country as they sought to define what Section 35 meant to them. It was Beverly McLaughlin and her court that helped them define that and put them on the road to reconciliation. Away from the court, I didn't know this, she's as masterful a chef as she is a jurist. She's written a cookbook. She's got another book coming, but a cookbook. It's called Keepers by Bev McLaughlin, and every recipe tells a story about when she serves it and why. You can't actually buy it, although maybe someone here will want to publish it now. But bound copies of these are given to her law clerks every Christmas. She gives them the latest version of her best recipes. And every year she'll cook them a beautiful dinner. See, everyone wants one now. As with the court in her years as chief, her cooking brings people together. One of her former law clerks describes her time as Chief Justice as one of uncommon clarity and uncommon unanimity. And I don't know anyone that I've had such a nice time speaking with. Ladies and gentlemen, Beverly McLaughlin.
Merci Rosemary. Bonsoir tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici ce soir. Et je suis très, très honorée de recevoir cette recognition. I am deeply moved and humbled to stand before you today on this occasion. We judges aren't supposed to think about public policy, but there are those who say we do it a bit on the sly. I would disclaim any such thing. However, I do leave you to judge for yourself now that I am safely retired from the judiciary. I have also want to thank Mr. Greenspan. I want to thank the organizers of this. I want to thank Anne-Marie. I want to thank the many wonderful people I see in this room who organized this evening, who've helped me along at different points in my life, the wonderful friends I've made. Merci beaucoup pour tout ce que vous avez fait pour moi. I cannot find the words to thank you enough. I have to also thank my vanity publisher, my husband, Frank McCardle, who's been a bit delinquent because we're out of cookbooks. He's supposed to get his act together once he retires, but you know, he's only 90, and he said, I'm not retiring yet. So I'm trying to point him in the right direction, but he will get there sometime toward the end of June, I believe, or so he's promised me. And then, although I won't have any future law clerks, I will have a few extra copies of my cookbook to give around, I hope. Thank you, Frank, not only for that, but the wonderful support you've given me throughout our marriage and our life. Now, when you get this award, or before you get it, Mr. Greenspan revs up the pressure. He comes to visit you. He plants himself opposite you. And he says, you know, this is a really big deal. And you know, it's nothing. You'll just have to say thank you. But, you know, it's a big deal and you should say something serious. So there's a lot of pressure in trying to say something serious that's also not going to send everyone out the door for the Porter flight. And maintain the interest throughout the room. But I cast my mind back and I thought, you know, it's been such a wonderful pleasure to have and privilege to have served as a judge for 36 years and now on the Supreme Court of Canada for 28. And when I stepped down, you know, I had such a sad moment, I could hardly speak. And I said, you know, the best part of my life, whatever I do in the future, this will be the centerpiece of my life. And I meant it. And along with that came such a deep debt of gratitude that a little country girl from Pincher Creek, Alberta, Mark and I share birthplaces that I'm surprised nobody's come up with a birther myth on yet, but they've served us very well. And that I could have come from that background and somehow become the Chief Justice of Canada is an absolutely amazing thing to me that even today I still pinch myself about. But I remember being on the ranch, and I was just a kid. We were 25 miles southwest of Pincher Creek, and my father got all dressed up, and I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going into a town meeting. And I said, why are you doing it? He said, well, the local ranchers are upset with the Hatarian Brethren. Now, this was an Anabaptist sect that came into many parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and they were very, very religious people. They dressed differently, they lived differently, and they were amazingly good farmers and very entrepreneurial. And some of the local people didn't like that very much. They said they're different, and they're too successful, and they're buying land, and they shouldn't. So we've got to get the government to stop that. So my father went into town, and I'd never heard of human rights or equality or the evils of discrimination, but he said, I'm going in and I'm going to talk to those ranchers. Well, he came back, and no doubt he didn't endear himself to them, but in the end, no one petitioned for a law that would discriminate against the Hatarian Brethren. And that was a lesson I learned very early in my youth. Fast forward 40 years, I'm on the Supreme Court of Canada. And when I think back on the values that have been made manifest to me and important to me during that tenure, this idea of a democracy that's based on the rule of law and on respect for rights and diversity is at the very, very heart of it. We live in a diverse country. We are privileged to do that. A rich country filled with people of all kinds and backgrounds, and that's what makes us so rich and what makes us so unique. What makes us so unique in the world, and as Chief Justice I traveled a lot through the world, is our basic decency, our basic understanding of how we can all, with our different backgrounds, with our different origins, our First Nations, those who've come after, with their various credos and religious beliefs, how we can all live together in harmony. And I have to tell you, I don't mean to boast, but I believe that Canada stands as a model to the world in this respect. Now, I have lived through a wonderful epoch. It was the epoch of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I became a judge in 81. 82 was the inauguration of Pierre Elliott Trudeau's charter in pursuit of what he called a just society. We're still working for a truly just society, but I believe the society we're in is much juster than it was, and we are making progress. Behind all of that move for human rights, anti-discrimination law, living together in peace and harmony, of course, was a terrible legacy of World War II and the Holocaust, a time when governments killed people because of their religion, because of their race, because they were viewed as mentally or physically substandard. And that was a terrible time. And when World War II was ended, and people thought about that terrible time, they came together and they said, we have to build a new world. We have to build a world where people respect each other, where people of all kinds and all religions can live together. And a Canadian, John Humphreys, went down to New York and helped nations from around the world draft the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And country after country adopted those declarations. We have them across Canada, and ultimately our declaration became our constitutional Charter of Rights. This was a wonderful era to be a judge in, because people believed in rights and people believed in respect, and they believed that there was a way to live together. As things even seemed better at the end of the Cold War, when the Iron Curtain fell, when the Berlin Wall fell, when Francis Fukuyama famously declared the end of history. For a while it seemed that he was right. We would march on to great triumphs in democracy based on the rule of law and respect for rights. But a few years ago, it seems things began to waver, not in Canada, which has remained true to its values, but elsewhere in the world. And one thinks of the factors that Mark Carney mentioned, the feeling amongst peoples of loss of control, of loss of trust, of exponential change so fast that we cannot cope with it. And the results have not always been happy. In 2016, Freedom House reported that for the 11th straight year, more countries suffered declines in political rights and civil liberties than experienced gains. And in January of 2018, this year, the World Justice Project reported that almost 2/3 of the 113 countries surveyed reported an erosion of fundamental rights. You all know the stories: Hungary, Poland, Russia, Turkey, to mention only a few, have been moving away from liberal democracy based on the rule of law to more right-wing autocratic forms of governance. Courts have been attacked. Judges have been imprisoned. Lawyers have been imprisoned. Journalists have been imprisoned. Laws are being changed to erode the independence of the judiciary. Closer to home, south of the border, one sees efforts to downgrade the rule of law. I pray it will never happen. I believe it will never happen. But nevertheless, I think looking on what is happening around the world, one of our greatest challenges in these uncertain times is to stand fast for a democracy based on the rule of law and respect for every human being, regardless of their color, their race, their religious belief, or their ethnicity. These principles have served Canada, and I believe much of the world, very, very well for the last 50 years. With luck and our efforts, they will continue to guide us into the future. We still face those elements of fear of loss of control, fear of loss of trust, fear that we will not be able to deal with exponential change. It is truly a new world we are facing. But I believe that if, as Mark says, we live up to our values, Canada will preserve its democracy strong and vibrant as we move forward and continue to shine as a beacon to the world. I thank you for this evening, and I thank everyone here and this great country for having allowed me to serve in such a small way. Merci beaucoup.
Good evening, bonsoir. My name is Julie Caffley. I'm Senior Vice President, Policy at the Public Policy Forum, and it's my delight to close this evening. Quelle soirée impressionnante, quelle soirée inspirante. Merci beaucoup d'être parmi nous ce soir. When Senator Peter Harder walked into the room this evening, he said to me, it's like Canada in a jar. And aren't we delighted and aren't we honored and privileged to be in this jar this evening? So thank you. We started off the evening with the Syrian Children's Choir, who inspired us and were beautiful, and I was particularly delighted to hear them sing the new lyrics for O Canada, and very proud of that. J'aimerais remercier notre hôte fabuleuse, merci Rosemary, to have guided us through this evening and been such a wonderful host. I did have to correct one thing that you said. You mentioned that Mary Walsh had sworn on stage perhaps a bit more than anyone else. And you know, at the bar afterwards, we can tell you about when Ralph Klein hosted the dinner. So on behalf of the PPF Board of Directors et toute l'équipe au Forum des politiques publiques, j'aimerais féliciter notre lauréat et nos lauréats, Mark Carney, Beverly McLaughlin, Francine Pelletier, Caitlin Tolley, Richard Discerny, Michael Donovan, and our warrior princess, Mary Walsh. You're all exceptional Canadians and have truly made a difference in our country and abroad. Merci beaucoup pour vos contributions. We have a couple of quick draws. We'll make it quick and painless. Porter Airlines has kindly donated 2 tickets. We're going to email you the tickets. And the winner is Emily Pierce Rayner, Director of Government Relations at Fertilizer Canada. The next prize is for a set visit to one of Canada's most successful and longest-running drama series, Murdoch Mysteries. You and a guest will enjoy a rare behind-the-scenes look at Canada's #1 drama with a tour of the set where the hit series is filmed. With an average viewership of 1.2 million, the show is going into its 12th season on CBC. Thanks to PPF members, the Canadian Media Producers Association and Toronto-based production company Shaftesbury, one lucky winner will learn what happens behind the scenes of Murdoch Mysteries. And congratulations to Andrea Clay Wagner, Manager Client Development and Event Strategist at Bespoke Audiovisual, one of our sponsors this evening. And your certificate will be emailed to you as well. The Public Policy Forum would not exist without the support of our members, and so many of your organizations tonight support us in what we do, good policy for a better Canada, and thank you so much for your support. This evening would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. Many thanks to our lead sponsor, CN. And to our supporting sponsors, Bespoke Audiovisual, CPA Canada, CPAC, Enbridge, Manulife, National Public Relations, Porter Airlines, Power Corporation of Canada, Queen's University, TD Bank Group, Tech Resources, and the Globe and Mail. Thank you very much to all of our sponsors. And we have a tiny group at the Forum of 25 people that work tirelessly to pull this evening together. And in fact, over the past few days, many of you have participated in our special evening dinners, our smaller dinners last evening, our Canada Grow Summit today. Tomorrow morning, we start off with a board meeting, followed by a full-day session on sports and ethics, and another session on agricultural competitiveness with Dominique Barton. The team is committed, passionate, hardworking, and mighty, so please join me in thanking the team at the Public Policy Forum. You'll all be sent a reminder potentially this evening or tomorrow morning for the testimonial dinner in 2019, April 11th. Please join us. We have a dessert bar outside, so please join us for dessert bar, and obviously at the Intercontinental Bar following. And don't forget to join us at the Wonk Prom, the dinner after party, and the information is available on your table for that. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde et à l'année prochaine. Merci bien.